Monday, 2 p.m. in Dubai. What's that like?
It's lovely. I mean, the weather's great, sun is shining. Can't complain. It's quite nice because my days are quite fluid at the moment. So, you know, early calls, but then the afternoon's a bit more chilled, and then the evening kind of kicks off. So yeah, it's good. I can't complain.
Why are your days chilled, if I can ask?
I say chilled. I mean, chilled in the sense that I don't have like back-to-back calls in the way that I used to. When I was in LA, I'd be up at like 6 o'clock in the morning and then just be like on calls, catching up with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Now my team is, New York, Berlin. So time zones are a little bit more forgiving, I think. To
Yeah.
ease into the day.
And is that a time zone thing, or is that a cultural thing?
It's a time zone thing for sure, because it's more like the people I'm working with are either not awake yet or their day is kind of just starting, so it gives a little bit more freedom in that sense.
Okay. I get it. Well, listen, thanks for doing this. It's very much appreciated. I know I kind of like brought it up vaguely a while back. I don't know if you caught it. I think like when we first started talking, I was like, hey, maybe we could do something content wise. So I'm happy to finally actually get you on Mudder Fracas. I don't know how much you know about Mudder Fracas, but I'll just kind of give a quick breakdown. So for those who know or for those who don't know, my name is Yao. I'm a music tech entrepreneur, but I like to think of myself as a creative entrepreneur. I've done it a few times. I've fumbled a couple of times. I've won a couple of times. So, I kind of like this space. And essentially, I'm inspired by people who do specifically that. People who build products, people who build companies, people who create communities, people who create movements. And the concept of Mudder Fracas is a mudder is a racehorse that runs well through muddy conditions, right? One of the most toughest and resilient racehorses you find. And a fracas, I think most of us know what that is. That's the noise, the commotion, the scuffle. So we coined the term Mudder Fracas, meaning a determined individual weathering through harsh conditions, the naysayers, the hurdles, the noise. And that's what we're going with. It makes sense. I love how it sounds. And I think it's very descriptive of the journeys and the hurdles and the wins, that entrepreneurs go through. So essentially, we're talking to predominantly tech entrepreneurs. Of course, I come from the music background, so a lot of it is going to be music based, but I'm really interested in industries, across the board. And of course, Inder, you're joining us today. Perhaps maybe you can give a short intro of who you are, and we'll dive into that as we go on. So I've been stalking, so I'm definitely gonna unearth a few things, hopefully a few surprises, maybe, I don't know, we'll see.
Sounds great. Well, great to be here. I love the concept of the show, and the brand resonates deeply. So I'm Inder, the CEO and co-founder of a company called PIXELYNX. I set the company up with the iconic musician deadmau5 and Richi Hawton, as well as their two partners. And we're building an interactive entertainment ecosystem focused on entertainment IP. So that is everything from bringing intellectual property onto the blockchain, and then developing applications and developer tools so that people can build on top of that IP in a really seamless way. And our vision is really to grow intellectual property through new collaborative use cases, remixing, AI, UGC, and really enabling developers to also access IP much more seamlessly. So yeah, exciting time to be in this space. Obviously lots of problems to solve. And yeah, I see myself as a, creative technologist. I'm very much arts driven. I make music. I kind of enjoy the creative side of things, but also, of course, take a deep interest in technology, business models, new frameworks to kind of push the industry forward. So arts first, but very much tech led.
Thank you. I picked up on that. Like I said, I've been stalking. I was like, wow, this dude's got like a vast creative background, but this is always like a business or economic kind of interjection along the way. So I like that, and it's really interesting, up my alley. First question: We're at the Princess Trust Gala. Well, maybe it's called the King's Trust now, right? It should be called the King. You know the Princess Trust, right?
Of course, yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I think it's called the King's Trust. I would think they upgraded the name now that he's a king, right? So let's just say we're going to assume we're at the King's Trust Gala, right? And it's loads going on. It's ram-packed. You've got like all sorts of dignitaries, all sorts of guests. In one corner you have the guys from A16Z, Andreessen Horowitz, epic VCs. They tried to set up an office in London, didn't really pan out, don't know what's going on there. Maybe there's a chance to rope them back in. But yeah, they're huddled in a corner. Another corner, there's like royal dignitaries, right? And another corner, there's like some ministers. And then another corner, there's a bunch of like entrepreneurs and VCs. So where exactly are you in the room? Are you on stage projecting something, a vision? Are you at the bar? Are you on the dance floor? Are you behind the DJ booths? Or are you chatting delightfully with Queen Consort Camilla? Where are you?
Oh, that's a tough question. I mean, I'd probably be teleporting in between a few of those. If I had to choose, most likely I would probably be on stage projecting a vision. That would probably be the most common place, I guess, to kind of find me in many ways. But yeah, I'm a teleporter in that sense. I mean, I love to get on the dance floor. I'm definitely behind the DJ booth. I'm definitely networking. So that's a tough question, but I'll stay on stage to start with.
Okay, nice. Okay, I didn't picture. I thought you were going to start with behind the DJ booth, but I like that. Okay, and the teleporter makes perfect sense. I think I'm kind of like you. I think I would be between stage and Camilla. Yeah, and it's purely because I think she this is not political. This is no agenda, but I think she's got some stories. It's interesting. Yeah, I don't want to say stories, but I think she's got some interesting concepts that nobody has heard before. So I'd be intrigued to hear those concepts, and I'm an ideas guy, so I'd just be interested to hear that. And I think based on that conversation, I'd branch out into a couple of different scenarios. Definitely back and forth between the dance floor and Camilla, or maybe with Camilla to the dance. I don't know, but anyway, cool. All right, nice. So let's take it back a bit, right? Like I said, I've been stalking a little bit, and I think if I'm gonna speak to the great Inder Phull, do I pronounce it Phull?
Full.
Phull. Oh yeah, okay. If I'm gonna speak to Inder Phull, I definitely need to know what's going on with the background. So according to my research, right, you did economics at uni. Am I correct? Right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, and then you landed a job at E&Y, Ernst & Young. And you lasted like 5 months, and I'm not projecting my thoughts onto you, but it's like you kind of said like, yo, fuck this, I'm out of here. It's almost like that itch. I looked at that 5 month stint, and I was like, all right. And for me, it was telling with what came after it, right? Because after 5 months at Ernst & Young, after having gone to uni for economics, it's like, you then had a stint of the last like 14, 15 years, and you've launched at least 4 or 5 companies off the back of that after leaving Ernst & Young. So it's almost like, yo, you can't hold this guy back. Boom. What's the story there? Tell me a bit more about that. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so Ernst & Young was it was actually a summer internship, which I was obviously at that time quite excited about it because it was a really high profile organization, and it takes a lot of effort to be able to get a role in those kinds of companies. But at the same time, I was also really passionate about startup culture, and I was working on my own venture at the same time, which was one of the first kind of tech businesses I launched. It was a kind of student recruitment platform, which feels very left field for where I am now. But I was kind of balancing between these two lives in some sense of working on this startup. I was pitching to investors, I was writing business plans, I was also skateboarding a lot and making music, and kind of just felt more connected to an independent mindset, wanting to do my own thing. I come from a very entrepreneurial family, so I think it was also like in my blood to focus more on running my own company. But yeah, Ernst & Young was interesting. You know, it was a summer internship, so it was only like 3-4 months. And I was working on like international tax, which I did find really fascinating. But it just wasn't the right environment for me. You know, it was, you know, being in an office, like it felt incredibly corporate. I wasn't really surrounded by like-minded people in the same way that I found, you know, in the skate parks or in these startup accelerator programs that I was also working on. And it kind of gave me the obvious click. I was like, yeah, this is probably not for me. Like I'm going to be more focused on culture and startup world, you know, thinking rather than being in a big four accounting company. But yeah, interesting time. I was still trying to find my way, but very much you know, excited about business more than working in a corporate.
Did you take anything from there? Like when you were done with your internship, and I know that feeling, right? Is that you're kind of like on fire inside, and you've got this like desire to do something, whether it's create, whether it's earn, whether it's become profitable, whether it's to build, found, whatever, right? I'm assuming you kind of had that energy. When you talk about like you're around like, you know, young creative skate parks, it's you know, we're all kind of like bouncing on the walls with this energy and trying to figure out how to direct it. And looking at your career path, it sounds like fresh out of university, you were already applying yourself. You had, like you said, you'd already started up this youth recruitment agency. You know, a lot of people don't get to do that. I think you speak about it like it's yeah, I just did this. I started this. It's very different from what I'm doing now. I started this recruitment agency. But you think about it. Let's be real, right? The average person fresh out of uni, it's fine, right? They're, you know, focused on, you know, getting that role and career progression within that company. But to just kind of off the rip start a company, this is why we do Mudder Fracas, is to understand that kind of energy, right? Oh gosh, what happened?
Where did you go?
Are you there? Can you still hear me?
Did you just disappear?
Oh my gosh.
Yo.
I'm back. Sorry about that. My gosh. What a nightmare. I had one of my lighting systems explode, like just the bulb. Fortunately I had spares hanging around.
Oh, right.
I hope it doesn't happen again. But I think I took all of the safety measures to like make sure that it's not overcharged. And I was on a roll there. Anyway, so are we recording? I believe I hopefully just picked up from where we stopped recording, and I'll edit everything out. All right, cool. Okay, so the question that I asked was that I'll edit this obviously. So you talk about like you know, you started, well, when we look at when you first started your first company, right? So I understand was like a youth recruitment kind of company, right? Is that correct?
It's like a platform, yeah. It was sort of helping students find jobs in companies, basically.
Okay. And was this your like first official company?
Well, I was running a DJ company before that, which was probably like the first company in a sense of like generating revenue and finding clients. In between that and uni, I was also like making websites for people as a freelancer, kind of, you know, just finding jobs online and doing that. So again, little things, but this was probably the first, like, you know, what I consider to be like the first company, because I wrote a business plan for it. I was pitching investors. I got accepted into like a startup accelerator program, you know, raised some capital around it. So it was probably the most serious start into kind of business, I would say, yeah.
Right. And you mentioned that you come from an entrepreneur family, right? Tell me a bit more about that.
Yes, I was born in Kenya, Nairobi, lived there for around 10 years. My granddad moved to Kenya when he was probably in his early teens, maybe 14 or so. So he was, my dad was born there. My granddad set up a business, which, you know, still sort of family business, you know, focused on, so it's like steel manufacturing. My dad then he didn't choose to work within the family business. He set up his own company, which was a sort of, it's like a it was like a mill essentially. Like they would kind of create, maize and flour. So, I was I used to go to the offices a lot. I kind of grew up in that environment, seeing an office, seeing like, a workforce and, seeing my dad, my granddad all being involved in, ultimately what would become a pretty, substantial kind of family business. And I think that definitely inspired and influenced a lot of my thinking. I remember, very early, even when I was like 10 years old, thinking about businesses, designing fashion brands, like coming up with ideas for things and almost playing office, as I would call it. So, I would say it's very much like in my blood. Yeah, it was kind of the idea. And yeah, so I think I was always just really inspired by that kind of, idea of like being able to build something from scratch and kind of grow, into like an ecosystem of sorts. And so, I was also very misbehaved in school. I was on report for most of my life in school. I did get great grades, but, my teachers had a lot of concerns about my lifestyle, let's say. And so, pretty much from high school to sixth form, I was on report. I'd have to stay back at school for an hour every day. I'd bunk a lot of lessons. My attendance was like 15%.
Oh, wow. I couldn't get away with that.
Yeah, I mean, there'd be times where I would be in a lesson and then I'd be pulled out and my mum would be in the room with the headmaster and they were like, so this is what he did today. I was a bad child. But, not like terrible, but, very, very uncontrollable. We won't go into that. So yeah, I just... I don't think
will we not? Why not?
Yeah, maybe the uncensored version. So I guess that's kind of like a indicator of like where my head was at, though. I didn't really fit into the traditional system, I think, in the way that most people would have, right? Like I didn't really care that much about traditional education. Like I did it, I got great grades and like went to uni and everything, but just didn't really feel like what was exciting for me. And I think it was being in uni when I really got into making music and skateboarding and kind of being around like a different culture. I think I started to find my identity more and like where I wanted to be, which was, again, more connected to like building my own ideas and, having more freedom around like the path that I choose to take.
Yeah.
I just, was very disillusioned with the traditional role. So that ultimately set up my first business. And, it's at that same time I'm at Ernst & Young, kind of contrasting these two paths I could take. One which was a lot more challenging in that you have to build something from scratch, and the other which felt a little bit more straightforward. I had certain people in my friend circle who massively inspired me and showed me the way I think was really important for the UK scene at this point. People like Jamal Edwards was someone who I grew up with when I was in my late teenage years, and seeing him go from this idea into what became this global platform. He showed so many young people the way that you can build something. And we were entering this new age of the internet where creators had a voice and people could build platforms. And so I would say that massively influenced a lot of my thinking as well, just to see like these peers be able to take ideas and go so far with them. Yeah. So I'd say, all the things that kind of came together, I'd say is part of like that early, 16 to 20, upbringing.
Yeah. Well, rest in peace to Jamal Edwards. I remember when he got his break, and you had no choice but to pay attention to what he was bringing to the table, right? It was 100%. It was epic. It was definitely a change in media and the culture around it. But yeah, absolutely. This is an obvious thing, but obviously family and parenting plays a huge role to that, because I completely understand that. I myself come from on my mom's side, at least, a family of entrepreneurs. My mom was an entrepreneur, fashion design, beauty products. Her mother before her, in Ghana back in the day, like, a couple of bakeries, like a couple of significant bakeries in some significant places, and just passing it down to her daughter, and then for my mom to her children. It's just an entrepreneurial spirit, right? You see your parents working in certain circumstances. I remember, like, you know, late nights, and my mom was like in the living room, like, take everything off the table and like kind of stress the table out, because she did fashion design, and she's got all the like the you know like the tracing paper and like drawing around it and sketching and designing. Okay, I've got a big wedding coming up, or I've got this client, this, that, right? And she's just preparing, working all night long, because in the morning that work needs to be delivered to, she needs to go to her workshop, and you know she had tailors, and it's like, and then she's now pitching the idea to the tailors, like, all right, this is what we're going to do, this is the brief, boom, boom, boom. And I got to tag along to see that process, because sometimes you're in school, sometimes you're not. You know, sometimes you're standing next to her at the dinner table trying to sketch as well, right? And then sometimes you're sitting in the workshop or in the tailor's room and you're just watching her deliver this message, which she kind of ideated the night before. So it's a beautiful process, the creative process, the entrepreneurial process. And I think, you know, when parents have the opportunity to share the experience with their children, I think they definitely should. I try to do that a bit with my kids. It's like, or as opposed to, hey, I'm busy now. I kind of tell them what I'm doing, tell them what I'm working on, right? They may not get it now, but maybe in 5-10 years, something will click. Hey, that's what he was doing, and maybe I can apply that and do it better or do it differently, right? So,
I agree.
Yeah, man, family always. You know, family's great. Okay, moving on. So you've generated circa 40 million, raised circa around 40 million to date, right? Did you get to pocket any of it?
No, not really. Like, it's an investment into the company.
Okay, no, I didn't mean in like a stash way. You know, I'm sorry. Like, you know, sometimes I'm sure it's normal, right? When a certain amount is generated, sometimes you like automatically think, even if it's just like subconsciously or involuntarily, your mind starts to trigger, oh, like, wow, okay, so what's the founder's cut? You don't have to tell me, don't worry, I'm not asking that question, but it was more just to say, okay, that's rather impressive. I'd love to know about your approach to investment. That was really just like the segue.
Yeah, it's it's a learning process, I think, because it's a very different world to go out to institutional investors and global companies that, you know, deal with, in many cases, you know, billions of dollars of value. So that was a learning process. I think when I first started really focusing on fundraising, it was when I set up PIXELYNX a few years ago, about 4 years ago. And, I'll kind of track back actually to how I got my first client when I was in my early 20s. I was on LinkedIn, just aggressively messaging people. And I had this job at Channel 4 that I was kind of working on whilst also running this business on the side. And I messaged someone who worked at this massive agency called Grey London. And he was like, yeah, this sounds interesting. Why don't you come in and like present it to us? So I'd take a day off work, like a holiday, paid day off, to go and pitch to this client. And that was kind of what I was doing at this stage of trying to figure out this transition. And given this presentation, I was like, I was running an advertising agency, and gave him this presentation about how I think I could connect them to amazing talent and, really help reposition their brands for youth culture in a more strategic way. And he just really liked it and offered me a brief on the job on that first meeting, which was more than I was getting paid in a whole year. Wow. And he offered me a project with Lacoste that was, for like 30-40 grand, let's say, at that point in time. I was like 21, 22 years old.
Wow.
And I just very quickly understood, like, okay, LinkedIn is like this powerful medium. Like, wow, like I could literally connect with this guy who's a C-suite at one of the largest, most reputable agencies in the world. And after a meeting, he's given me a brief. I was like, this is crazy. Like, okay, there's something here. So obviously I had to pitch, and, I feel like I honed that skill probably in the earlier years when I was, working on my first businesses and, kind of going through that flow. But so, I got that learning very quickly. LinkedIn is this superpower if you can use it in the right way. You can connect with people. And I won many clients.
And this is like when you're 22, you're talking about, like when you were using LinkedIn to this. Yeah, wow. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So I was about 22 at this point. And over the course of that, like 5 years or more, LinkedIn was my tool.
Yeah.
I would use it to find clients. I'd use it to connect with people. And then when I set up PIXELYNX, I had to fundraise, and I built up a great advisory board and a great team, and got a lot of introductions through those people's connections. And I must have pitched 100+ investors, like no doubt, and every single one of them said no. And you just keep going. You understand that like you need to make progress and you need to show traction, and things can't slow down. And I think I had reached out to Robbie Young. He's the CEO for Animoca Brands.
Right, yeah.
And, he set up a call and, jumped on a meeting with me. And we ended up building a relationship over many months. I invited him to join me on a podcast that I was hosting.
Yeah.
And after this podcast, he called me and said, all right, we'll take the investment. And this was like 3 months later, from a first LinkedIn outreach to then inviting him to, have a chat with me on this. It was on like a panel, I think, and we spoke about the metaverse and more. And, he just called me like 2 hours later saying, we'll do the $2 million investment.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, like, okay, crazy. And off the back of that, just continue, building connections, reaching out to people. It's a relationship business.
Yeah.
But you also have to, show traction, show progress, and, understand how to refine your presentation. But I would say LinkedIn. LinkedIn was the superpower, right? That gets you to anyone, and then it's up to you to pitch and make sure that what you're presenting has legs and has, a good business model and a very clear, vision.
Yeah, that's really, really, really impressive. I relate to that definitely because I think LinkedIn has had a resurgence, I think, like of late, right? But I'm just harkening back to the time that you're talking about, like initially that was like 14, 15 years ago, right?
When it was my first client, that was about 14, 15 years ago.
Yeah. And it's good to hear you're using LinkedIn, because I too around that time was using LinkedIn religiously, to the point whereby, I had a hiatus from it and I came back, but LinkedIn is extremely useful depending on you just have to understand, you see for me, one thing that I see happening is the creative industries, specifically leaning towards music, hasn't really gone full on LinkedIn, if that makes sense, right? I think it's only happening now. You see pockets of different music folk coming onto LinkedIn, pockets of different labels, different profiles. And I think if you know how to approach it, it's like you can get a lot of value out of it. This is the thing, right? But again, it's I guess what I'm trying to say is just kudos to them at LinkedIn, because I think there was a trend at some point where the music industry started coming to LinkedIn, and then it kind of dropped off, and then LinkedIn identified this trend that they figured out how they can engage more of these music industry people, and then it kind of and then the trend kind of picked up again. I don't know if that's something you noticed. I personally noticed it because having used LinkedIn, this is not a LinkedIn ad, damn, they should, your sponsor goes here, yeah, absolutely. God, if you know somebody at LinkedIn, please, man, tell them to sponsor this segment. But yeah, I've been using it for 20 years, right? And I've bounced personally, professionally between corporate world and music business / music tech, and having had all of my contacts in the corporate world on LinkedIn, then I came to music and I had no contacts. It was very, very difficult to kind of build up my I actually even started a whole new profile to kind of build up my contacts back in music. But I gradually did it, and it was hard, people from music to be there. But you look back between now and let's say 10 years ago, it's completely different. So kudos to them for understanding how to engage the music industry. I think they still have a couple of steps to go. But anyway, it's
more tech, I would say. It feels like, generally speaking, right? It feels it's more like startups and companies building technology that you typically see kind of dominating the feed, and the music narrative is there. I think it is there, but you're right. And it's also interesting because I guess over the last few years there has been this kind of rise in people understanding that you have to also be a thought leader, and LinkedIn is a good place to do that and to build your profile and to have a voice in an industry. So, and I think that's actually also going back to the point of investment, probably something that played a massive role. Like I spent a lot of time writing articles, sharing news, updating, people on my thoughts of the sector and where the space was going. And that led to lots of, opportunities, invitations to panels, like opportunities to partner and investors reaching out. And so it did play, I would say it played a massive role in kind of at least establishing a presence and an identity that was quite central to then being able to like grow, in between the things that you don't see are like the hundreds of messages that get sent and the hundreds of people who basically decline, right, and are not interested in investing at that point in time because maybe it's not the right fit or, you need more traction. And that's really where the grind, I think, ultimately, starts to come in and, it's like one more message, could be the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Even on that point you make about like music tech, right? I think that kind of mirrors the way the music industry is going because music tech is, this like firsthand, music tech is becoming a lot more prominent in the music business. It is more prominent, right? It's that, but I speak specifically about like, let's say label infrastructure to new tech platforms, right? And, there's some lucky people who are either lucky enough to like hop from label world to tech world, right, to music tech and flourish in their careers. And then there's some lucky people who have been brought from music tech world to labels, or labels are setting up specific divisions because essentially their future strategy is going to be, music tech based, platform based, blah, blah, blah. But then there are all those people in the middle who are trying to figure out how they can transition to this new space and what the music industry is evolving to. Right. And I think it's like when I talk about the music industry, we're not embracing tech. Like you don't find loads of label people. You didn't find them there. Now you find them there, but they just have profiles. They're not really active. I think, like you said, when you look at the profiles from the music businesses, predominantly music tech that are on LinkedIn, it kind of speaks to what is happening in the industry if you look at the trend and where it's going. Anyway. Not to dwell too long on that. Let's switch our gears a bit. You're a Londoner, right? Or were, sort of, kind of.
I'd still classify myself as a Londoner in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. Okay. I think I lived there for, how long did I live there for? 18 plus years.
Oh wow. Yeah, kind of like me, 17 years. Anyway, you've done you grew up in Kenya, beautiful country. And then long time in London and LA, but now you're in Dubai, right? Why'd you move to Dubai?
I work very heavily in the blockchain industry, and so there are a few regions where the government has put in really advanced like regulation and infrastructure to build blockchain companies, and so I was quite excited about what's happening here. It's becoming a bit of a hub, I would say, for like I said, great regulation. A lot of blockchain like chains and infrastructure companies are based out here. So there's definitely one part of that was like, okay, regulatory wise, feels like a good place. There's a lot of excitement. The Middle East is growing at a massive rate. The government is looking to double GDP by like 2035, 2030. So there's a lot of investment into AI, blockchain technologies as well. So I was quite excited by that. It's also I would say a new market, for example, from the lens of music, they don't have the traditional infrastructure of the rest of the world. You don't have rights collection societies in the same way. You don't have all this like legacy. And so there's an opportunity in many ways to help embed new ways of thinking for music rights, music monetization, and kind of look forward. So yeah, like I said, a number of things. Also, lifestyle is amazing. Yeah. The weather's great. Very close to London. Yeah. Lots of factors. There's lots of expats here. So I'd say it's a pretty good place. Lots, good energy overall.
What's it like for Mudder Fracas like us? Builders, doers, like creatives, wildly creative people. What's it like?
I think it's good. Like, I've found that I'm going to more parties here than I was going to in Dubai, in LA, which is interesting. Okay. It's all outdoors.
Oh, nice.
You've got the best DJs in the world coming here. So like, you get this kind of Ibiza style,
I live in Spain now, but sorry, continue.
Yeah. So I found that to be amazing. Like it's also again like just a different culture. The people I found to be inspiring. Everyone's kind of thinking about like how they grow as artists. So I've been very inspired by it. Not only is the fashion also interesting, people take a lot of pride in how they look and what they wear. Not in the sense of like bougie, like let's just wear expensive things. Like the underground here has a great identity. But yeah, I would say it's good. Definitely it's good. Like they're investing into the arts, they're investing into technology. And like I said, one of the best things, it's also time zone wise is amazing. You can kind of connect with a lot of parts of the world pretty easily. You can travel really well.
And
highly recommend.
And I will be there. I really wanted to come in December because I know that we haven't spoken about it yet, but I know that you set up, or your team set up IMS Dubai there. How did that go? So, I mean, before IMS Dubai is International Music Summit. For those who don't know, it's well, maybe I'll let you introduce it because I might butcher it.
Yes, IMS is one of the most important events and brands in my life and my career development. Like when I was 24 years old, IMS, which was set up by Ben Turner, who's one of my co-founders. He's Richi Hawton's manager and a multi-talented like entrepreneur. He also set up the Association for Electronic Music. He's just a real leader when it comes to kind of building the infrastructure for our industry in many ways. He set that up with Pete Tong, iconic DJ, and Danny Whittle, who's also amazing bookings and music head. So they set that up many years ago, probably like 15 years ago maybe. It took place in Ibiza initially. It's a music conference that brings together key stakeholders, initially around the electronic music industry, and of course now from many parts of culture, technology, and beyond. And started off in Ibiza, grew massively across the world, went to Shanghai, went to LA. So they even have a version called IMS College, which is for younger people in Malta. So yeah, great music conference. I'd highly recommend people to check it out. Takes place in Ibiza in April. Beatport are now partners and owners of it. So
I heard about that.
That's now also being pushed forward by the Beatport team. And so when I was 24, they set up something called IMS Visionaries, which would aim to spotlight future leaders in the music industry. And I won it when I was, the second year, I think, of its operation. And through that process, got to meet Ben. IMS became a client of mine. I started working very closely with them, helping them develop marketing, partnerships, curation. And that was a platform that really helped establish my profile in the music industry. I got to meet so many amazing people, got to host many panels. And then over the course of many years, Ben Turner, who's the founder, became my co-founder as well. So I have a huge place in my heart for IMS. I think it's an incredible platform. We came to Dubai for the first time last year. It was the first MENA edition focused on the Middle East and North Africa. And, amazing energy because there's, so many artists. Well, first of all, so many brands from, let's say Europe and Americas that want to come to the Middle East because they understand it's a very important new region. There's top tier clubs here. It's a very different culture. There's, an audience of people willing to party and listen to great music, and it's on every weekend in principle. So you had a lot of interest from Europe, wanting to come over and understand how they could come over here, but also a lot of people from the Middle East wanting to connect with the artists from the West and the labels and teams from the West to understand how they could come over to Ibiza or come over to grow in Europe. So it was an amazing value exchange, I think. But also because it's a region still emerging, you could tell that there was a real hunger and excitement, and of course still problems and challenges to work through. There's a diversity challenge. How do we break through women? It's a global challenge and conversation, but regionally also something that has its own nuance that needed to be discussed. I would say it was very successful. I would imagine next year is going to be even bigger, and you had a lot of people from the investment world and more. So very cool.
Nice. So congratulations for launching IMS Dubai. It sounds really exciting, and even just hearing you talk about it, and just also what I know and friends out there, Dubai sounds like a really, really interesting place to like build creative or music tech startups. So just in the creative industries, I can see how definitely as the economy diversifies, because I do know like the Dubai government are diversifying, like they're offering beyond, they're looking at different products from tourism to sports, etc. Technologies, like they're really, really pushing hard on that front. Then obviously within technology you have the creative industries and entertainment. So I can see definitely how it must be a pleasure to build there. But I have a question, right? And like you've rightfully said just now that they're also still sort of learning different things, right? It's a work in progress. Is Dubai, from a tech perspective, is it a sandbox or is it a stage? And both are cool, right? I mean that in a positive way, right? And let me elaborate on that, because sandbox meaning that is like, you know what I mean, but I'll just, for the sake of the listeners, is that we can build something here and like kind of not necessarily get product market fit, but just, get the key elements that we need to then capitalize and focus on and replicate in faster moving or bigger markets, or bigger and slower markets. Maybe this is a fast market that got us quickly to understand how close we can get to product market fit. But I'm keen to understand, would you say it's like sandbox, or more like stage?
I would say it's both, but I'd say sandbox more because, I'll give you some stats. For example, the IFPI Global Music Report just came out like a week ago. MENA retained its position as the fastest growing recorded music region for the second time in 3 years. So 22.8% revenue increase since last year. So that tells you something, right? There's a massively growing music economy here that is being established. So very interesting. Depending on what genre of music you're talking about, obviously things fluctuate, but I've seen a really strong demand for electronic music, of course, obviously regional music as well. So yeah, I would say that's one thing, clear, right, that there is this growth opportunity that's taking place as like one of the fastest growing regions. But also at the same time, for a company to survive, investment is incredibly important. You need to be able to raise funds. There is a good investor landscape over here. There's a lot of investors with capital willing to support and build companies. The government is also putting a lot of infrastructure in place to help companies get set up and to be able to build their organization here, because they have a incentive to drive global talent to come over to Dubai and also to help train the local workforce, not just in Dubai, but in the Middle East as a whole. So I would say all of the elements are coming together, right? You have an audience of people, not only locals, expats, massive expat, community, for example, in Dubai and beyond, but also, for the music industry, fast growing sector, live events are massive over here. It's a very innovative region, so you will see a lot of technology and, new ideas. And like I said, also from a fundraising perspective and, government support perspective, all the pieces are in place. Like you can get office space really easily. You can get accepted into accelerators. There's startup hubs all over the place in the Middle East and places like this. So it's, there's definitely a lot of positives, depending on where you are on your journey as a startup and what exactly you're building. I would say it's a great sandbox for sure.
Awesome. Definitely, obviously a lot of us are aware of the progress that's been made in Dubai from innovation and tech perspective, but would love to definitely learn more. And I guess the only way to do that is to put feet on the ground, right? But before I do that, I would definitely love to see like IMS Dubai. First things first, see what you're doing there. Last question, just in relation to Dubai. 19-year-old tech kid comes up to you. He's based there, and he asks you, I want to follow the path that you're on, right? I want to build in the creative industries. I want to build my network. I want to be able to be like, called a founder, have a track record of having raised successful capital, deployed it, seen businesses become profitable, right? It's no easy feat. What's the first thing you'd ask them to unlearn?
To unlearn?
Yes.
Oh, that's an interesting one. That's a good question. Unlearn is, I don't know about unlearning because I feel like that's it's obviously very contextual.
Yeah.
When you're 19, how much do you really know? Like, my main thing would be find mentors, right?
Yeah.
Like that would be the thing that I would kind of point towards. I'd say like find mentors who can help you, express your vision and help validate what you're thinking about, and get those mentors to be ideally the most successful in their space as possible, like as far up the food chain as you can get. So unlearn the idea that people are not accessible. Everyone's accessible, right? Maybe that's what I'll say. Unlearn that, like everyone is accessible in some way. And yeah, so my suggestion would be find mentors, like surround yourself with a core group who can help you iterate through your idea, and then go from there, right? Get an action plan, get very clear milestones that you hold yourself accountable to, that your mentors and your advisors can also hold you accountable to, and begin executing. But yeah, the unlearn would probably be on the, like I said, forget that people are not accessible. Like people are accessible, and that's probably going to be a lot of the difference making between like where you are now and where you need to get to. Is there'll probably be a few people who are going to open some doors and help unlock that next step in your career journey and your vision, and so start to identify who those people are, and start to build those relationships as early as possible.
Nice. I definitely agree with that. That's a nice one. That's people are not inaccessible, right? Okay, let's talk about PIXELYNX and KOR Protocol. We're on like our last 10-minute stretch here. You want to tell us a bit more about what is PIXELYNX, and how is it powering KOR Protocol, and what is KOR Protocol? And I'll just kind of I'll preface it with that. I remember when PIXELYNX, just before it got what you guys got it acquired. I myself was part of a Web3 team at the time. I won't go into that right now. We did all right. We were backed by like Outlier Ventures. I'm sure you know them very well. But I remember seeing PIXELYNX, and you guys were smoking it, like you guys were killing it. So you know how it is when you're in that Web3 space at the time, circa early 2020s. It was, there was a wave at that time, right? Anyway, I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I prefaced it with that because a lot of companies didn't make it past that crypto winter, but there were a lot of amazing, great products before that, before it actually hit. And you could say everybody was getting funded, but that wasn't true, because when you look back and you really looked at excuse me, but the bodies on the floor after the catastrophe of the boom, then you realize what was really what. I want to learn about what you guys did right at PIXELYNX. What is PIXELYNX? Did Dead Mouse let you wear his helmet, by the way?
No, I haven't worn Dead Mouse's helmet yet.
Okay, cool. Sorry.
So PIXELYNX was a company I set up, really at the kind of start-ish of COVID. I was thinking about a lot. I almost had like this thesis that was kind of unfolding in my head around the intersection of a few technologies: music, gaming, blockchain, and AI, and how when these four come together, they could unlock a new format of consumption. That's kind of where my head was at, is like gaming, music, it's going to be really interesting medium, and interactivity especially is going to really kind of push the way that we consume music forward and unlock a new revenue stream. That was the thesis. And the idea was blockchain could be used as this technology to protect the IP rights so that people can collaborate and build in new ways that weren't possible before, where value can be shared, And it just creates this new framework for us to think about the business model. And so that was kind of the thinking, right? Blockchain will be this business model transformer. Games and AI will unlock this new interactive format, and music will be this IP, of course, right? That could expand. And this was very much, in the days of the metaverse, right? People were kind of thinking about that as like this kind of North Star for where the next era of the web will go. And so we went on that journey and we started building many products. PIXELYNX wasn't going to be a single product company. It was an ecosystem. The idea was to build products very quickly, take them to market, test feasibility. And we initially started off with games as our sort of initial kind of launch pad. We partnered with Niantic, the makers of Pokemon Go, launched a mobile product with them that we tested across a few markets. We built a number of different fun mini games and products, and we kind of realized that like game development at its core isn't necessarily where we want to sit. We are going to be much closer to the intellectual property rights layer, because that was the blocker for all of this to scale, right? Every time we'd build a new product, we'd have to go 6 to 12 months trying to negotiate rights.
Yep.
And it was just really complicated. And so we always knew that it was going to be part of the stack of tools that we would need to kind of evolve our thinking around. And so around 2 years ago, we started developing a few products kind of moving in this direction. One of those was KOR Protocol, which is an IP infrastructure. It basically lets rights holders register their intellectual property, their licenses, and their royalty information on the blockchain so anyone can build on top of it. So it's IP infrastructure to manage your IP on the blockchain. And through that, you can then tap into a number of different use cases, whether it's distributing directly into games, licensing your content out to AI companies, enabling people to build remixes off the back of your works, and having transparency around how all these use cases are being utilized and monetized, essentially. So that was basically where we got to with KOR Protocol. It's scaling pretty quickly. We have some amazing partners like Beatport. We work with IPs like Deadmau5, of course, like Black Mirror, the TV show, artists like Imogen Heap, who are all testing and monetizing off this infrastructure. And what we've done is then built products on top of that IP infrastructure. So one of our products is called Chorus. That is a interactive remix platform, lets you remix music from artists within a few clicks. And what we're seeing is artists can generate more revenue in 24 hours through our format than they would in a year on Spotify. And it doesn't need millions of streams. It needs 500 to 1,000 fans to get yourself into that position. And through that, again, just enabling IP to grow and to be utilized in places where typically you'd need to do manual deals. It's really time consuming, doesn't really work for the stakeholders like the developers to even entertain building music-based products or IP-based products, because it's so complicated, right, to get those rights. And so, the idea is make it seamless, make sure that the IP holders and the developers and the creators can all collaborate very easily, and use the blockchain as a layer to help provide transparency and to make sure people can get paid in real time and understand how their intellectual property is being used. So we're building an ecosystem, and the foundation is IP tooling, and on top of that is applications that allow people to use IP in new ways that help grow that intellectual property, primarily through like interactive formats, like I said, remixing, games, things of that nature.
That's awesome. So basically, product builders, app developers can come to the KOR Protocol and essentially benefit from these tools, but also intellectual property that's also already been managed, that's already been acquired, so that all they have to figure out is how do I make the best possible product or experience for my users, etc. Yeah, I completely get it. I come from that. Like my first startup or second, we had to acquire licensing. It's what it was. It was a music messaging platform. This was like 10 years ago. We eventually did, but it took us about a year and a half to get we got from Sony and Universal. But, we can talk about that another time, but, it was gut wrenching. You know what I mean? It was expensive and gut wrenching, but I do understand is that they have to protect the intellectual property of the artists or the rights holders. My only pushback is that as tech evolves and as we build products out here, it should be easier to acquire these rights and these licenses so that, so that we can also help the artists leverage tech as it moves forward, right? And we can also help them access their fans and their communities in new and interesting ways. So I definitely wish you guys all the best at KOR Protocol. I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about it. I was going to ask you about the relationship with labels and stuff like that, but that's probably a little bit more confidential. So I don't know if you can talk about that. How is the music industry warming up to like KOR Protocol?
Yeah, I think it's it's obviously a process that takes time and education. The blockchain aspect of things can be scary for like incumbents who have to go through very rigid processes before they're able to kind of put their rights into blockchain ecosystem. So we focus very much on independent artists and labels who have control over their rights, because they can move significantly faster and are not beholden to global rules that have been in place, which may not be ultimately beneficial to them in any form. So that's been our initial go-to-market. Of course, we have conversations with major labels and more, but I think the independent sector is growing at such a fast pace and represents the large growth opportunity anyway. So work very closely with independent labels and of course continue to then have to build out relationships across the ecosystem. This is what makes music unique challenges, that it's so fragmented. You have so many different stakeholders and rights holders across the industry, from collection societies to publishers to distributors to artists to songwriters, and to come up with a framework that allows all of these participants to be able to like buy into a system. It doesn't happen overnight, right? It's going to take a lot of iteration and testing and proving out the business model and partnerships. And so that's really where we focus, is building out the ecosystem, one piece at a time, with as many of the key players to then prove out, how does this work? How does everyone get the data they need? How does everyone have the approval rights that they're looking for?
Yeah.
And like I said, mainly focused on new use cases, places where they're not connected to and not reporting in any way. Like, there's not really a unified system for getting music into games. There's not really a unified system for licensing music to AI companies per se just yet. And so, there's opportunities to help establish these new frameworks so that, that can ultimately become a standard over time that people, can utilize. And that's really where we're focused, not on kind of going into like the traditional paths of monetization where there's already a, pretty, I wouldn't say effective, but there is a system in place that ultimately kind of covers people's needs.
Nice. So in closing, it feels like there's been like a blueprint to your career, right? And that blueprint has been, in my opinion, about like kind of bringing people together, right? Whether it's like community building, whether it's like through partnerships, whether it's through brand partnerships, right? From your first agency to your media company that we never actually got a chance to speak about. Like, I know you had like a creative culture media company. Then to you actually working with IMS, International Music Summit, and then of course eventually leading down to, I know I might have skipped one or two things, but eventually leading to PIXELYNX, right? It seems like at every stage, you yourself and your team were very good at bringing people together, whether it's through brand partnerships or just community building. And it feels like that is essentially the blueprint for KOR Protocol to an extent, right? I've got these years of experience. We've tried, we've failed, we've won, we've had ups, down, ups, and this is what we've learned. And now we're building this platform where you can come, you can profit, you can learn, and everybody can kind of profit for a better user experience, and we can build better products out of this. That's kind of my personal analysis of this. So the reason like we create Mudder Fracas is I want other founders to watch this. I want entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, or people who just want to work in tech companies or tech startups, or the next interesting product. But also, it's the whole ecosystem. We'll take it all. But also VCs as well. I want them to look at this and just get to know people and get to see how we think and move, right? Who should get in touch with you? Like, what kind of people do you want to reach out to you based on what you're building now and based on what you think you'll be building tomorrow?
It's typically the same core group of stakeholders. I think, artists, labels, IP holders is one batch. I kind of think about them as like the foundation of everything we do is to empower the creators and the people who build intellectual property and content and art. And then, of course, developers, right? If you're building products and you want to be able to tap into an ecosystem where you get access to IP rights, you get other benefits that can help you, whether it's raise funding or find product market fit or build partnerships. We work heavily with developers and the developer community. Of course, investors, we're always, introducing, new investors into the mix. But I would say, those are the general blend: artists, rights holders, developers, investors.
Nice.
But because it's an ecosystem, there's a role for everyone in the sense, right? Wherever you sit in the landscape as a stakeholder, and if you work with entertainment, culture, and digital IP and things of that nature, there's probably a place where you might find some relevance in the network, to either build or to utilize the products or to potentially add value in other ways.
Okay, got it. Inder, it's been an absolute pleasure. I hope this is the first of many conversations. Is there anything else that's like burning that you're like, hey, I want to say this, by the way? Beep, 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 boop, boop, boop. Anything at all?
No, I think it was a pretty good cohesive, discussion. Like I said, I think it's an exciting time, for culture, and of course, some people are very afraid of like the role that AI is going to play, and I think that those are valid concerns, to fight about, right? We can't I think we're on the edge of a creative renaissance, and it's coming. It's a place that's going to help people express themselves in a way that they've never been able to before, and to build things that push not only their own creative vision forward, but also, do things that are great for society and culture as a whole. And so, there's a lot to be excited about, and it's if you're excited about that concept of like a creative renaissance, then I think you'll enjoy what we're kind of cooking up, and the ethos that we have as well, which is a very collaborative, open network, for everyone to kind of share and build in the value together.
Awesome. Inder Phull, welcome to Mudder Fracas. You've done it. You've made it to the end. Give me a few months or so. I'll be chasing you for part 2. And thanks for your time.
Sounds good. That was great. Yeah,
Amazing.
Appreciate it.